Now, I want to talk about her relationship with Joe. So, Joe DiMaggio and Marilyn had a tumultuous on and off relationship that lasted until Marilyn's death. The two met in 1952, right as Joe's baseball career was coming to an end. He was immediately infatuated with Marilyn like everyone else. But like a lot of the men at the time, he wanted her to quit her job and just become a housewife, which is something she knew she did not want to do. Now, the two ended up marrying in 1952 and formed an agreement. Joe had to approve of all of Marilyn's roles and wanted her to stop being a stereotypical dumb blonde. When Marilyn would return home from set, Joe would berate her with questions and accusations to ensure she was following the rules, which sounds really toxic. Joe Jr., his son from a previous marriage, revealed that he heard screaming and watched his father drag Marilyn by her hair. One of Marilyn's closest friends said, "I discovered that Joe is absolutely obsessed with jealousy and possessiveness. He doesn't want to know about my business. He doesn't want to know about my work as an actress." Marilyn said, "He doesn't want me to associate with any of my friends. He wants to cut me off completely from the whole world of motion pictures, friends, and creative people that I know," which is like a big red flag when it comes to an abusive relationship. Isolation. Things began to get worse when Marilyn was in New York filming her iconic subway great scene. During filming, Joe allegedly looked disgusted when Marilyn's dress blew up in the air. Once they returned to LA, a fight over the scene allegedly turned physical. Just 9 months after their elopement, Marilyn filed for divorce, citing mental cruelty. Now, it's not like Joe was happy in this marriage either. He began to suspect that Marilyn was having an affair with Hal Schaefer, a voice coach. Joe turned to Frank Sinatra, who had been in a similar situation with his ex. Then Frank suggested that Joe hires a PI, a private investigator, to follow Marilyn. One night, Joe, Frank Sinatra, and several accomplices went to an apartment complex where they believed Marilyn and Hal were having their affair.
So naturally, Joe flew into jealous rage, and together with Frank Sinatra, amassed a gang of people to do a raid, bringing cameras and lights to try and catch Marilyn in the act, and get compromising photos of her with Schaefer. And what ended up happening was a huge blunder. They ended up breaking into the wrong door and essentially raided someone else's residence. They broke into the house of a sleeping 39-year-old woman with curlers in her hair, and woke her up by using an axe to get through her door. They came in and confronted her just to see that it wasn't Marilyn Monroe. In that moment, they realized they messed up and freaked out and took off. The LAPD later investigated it as an attempted burglary, but because the room was so dark and she was blinded by the spotlights on the camera, the woman was unable to identify any suspects. And the whole thing seemed to have been forgotten about until the Gossip magazine Confidential released an issue labeling the incident the wrong door raid, with an account of the incident itself, opening the whole case back up. And as a result, there was an investigation again and it went to trial, where Frank Sinatra had to give a testimony at. It was later discovered that the only reason this incident ever came to light was because Joe never paid the bill to his private investigator.
Now, they were headed to divorce, as they should be, but despite their complicated relationship, Joe remained loyal to Marilyn long after their divorce. Just weeks after the pair separated, Joe accompanied Marilyn to a planned surgery. They were even spotted together celebrating Joe's 40th birthday. But soon after, Marilyn was linked to Marlon Brando and Arthur Miller, who she went on to marry in 1956. Now, despite Marilyn's attempts to move on, Joe vowed he would win her back. So Marilyn moved on with Arthur, but Joe was still hung up on her, so he never lost contact. He felt like he could win her back. And maybe he had a chance, because Marilyn and Arthur ended up splitting up. It actually turns out that shortly after this split, she was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, just like her mother was. She was committed to the Payne Whitney Psychiatric Clinic by her psychiatrist in 1961. In a letter that Marilyn wrote in the institution, she said she was mistreated and ignored by staff, which I'm not surprised, because a lot of those facilities do have some bad stories, especially back in the 50s, 60s, and so on. I don't know if you guys have seen American Horror Story Asylum, but after watching that, I'm forever scarred. Marilyn actually called Joe, who came and saved the day. He came to the hospital and demanded that they released her. When the doctors refused, he allegedly said, "I'll give you 5 minutes to get her out here, or I'll tear this place apart brick by brick." After she was released, Joe got her proper care, and she called him her hero. Around this time, Marilyn became entangled with the Kennedys, which enraged Joe. He even ended his friendship with Frank Sinatra for introducing Marilyn to the Kennedys. Now, when Marilyn died in 1962, Joe claimed her body, planned her funeral, and arranged for roses to be delivered to her grave twice a week until his death. Now, I want to give you guys a trigger warning because Marilyn Monroe suffered when it came to motherhood. Artistic conflicts weren't the reason why Marilyn's marriage with Arthur Miller ended up falling apart. Marilyn was devastated due to her fact that she was unable to have a baby with Arthur. She experienced 3 pregnancy losses in a short period of time, which caused much strain in their relationship. She had a disorder which made it harder for her to conceive, so she in particular had a more difficult time, and it doesn't seem like Arthur was too understanding. Between the years 1956 through 1958, she had several failed pregnancies, and she kept them all a secret. She was suffering so badly from the pain, she became addicted to barbiturates and alcohol. Marilyn felt like losing these babies were all her fault, and all she wanted was a normal family. One relationship I loved that Marilyn had like literally there's like only one, was her friendship with Ella Fitzgerald. Marilyn said Ella was her very favorite person. It was rumored that Ella was denied a performance at a club because of her race. However, it was later revealed that the club's owner, who had previously allowed black singers like Eartha Kitt and Dorothy Dandridge, thought that Ella wasn't glamorous enough to play at the club. So it wasn't about her being black. She just wasn't glamorous enough. After learning this, Marilyn stepped in and told the club owner that she would be in the front row every night if he allowed Ella to perform. Knowing that Marilyn would draw a huge crowd, Ella was given the chance to do that. I'm glad that's the kind of legacy that Marilyn left behind, especially when she had so many bad people in her life. I mean, in 2012, we actually learned some information about Marilyn, and it goes back to her ex-husband, Arthur Miller. FBI kept extensive files on Marilyn and released many of their findings in 2012. The files revealed that the government suspected Marilyn was a communist. In 1956, Marilyn married Arthur Miller, a playwright. The file revealed that the FBI thought that Arthur was the culture frontman of the Communist Party. The FBI believed that Arthur was influencing Marilyn to support communism, and even asserted that they thought that there was evidence to prove that the religious ceremony at their wedding was done in an attempt to cover up any suspicions of their involvement in communism. They sound paranoid. The released files also revealed that the FBI believed money from Marilyn's production company was being used to fund communist activities. Now, although Arthur and Marilyn went on to divorce in 1961, the FBI maintained their suspicions due to Marilyn's infatuation with Frederick Vanderbilt Field, a member of the Vanderbilt family who had been pushed out because of his leftist political views. In 1962, Marilyn was spotted with Frederick on a shopping trip in Mexico. And despite following her every move, they never found any sign of communism. And I think it shows how weird the government was at this time. They were prying a little bit too much, spying a little bit too much. I mean, I'm sure they're still spying a ton, but back then they made it more apparent.
Marilyn Monroe was investigated for espionage after fighting for freedom of information in the Marilyn Monroe file. A journalist sat with an FBI agent and an attorney, and each question asked would either be read to a journalist or they were told it could not be shared. One thing that was noticeable on her file was the letter C in the file number. According to the documentary I watched, that stood for Foreign Counterintelligence. They thought that she may have been talking to communists.
Now, after Marilyn and Arthur split up, he got to keep the couple's dog, which sounds so nasty mean. Just give her the dog. But Marilyn was allegedly devastated by this. Frank Sinatra decided to give Marilyn a new dog as a Christmas present. Marilyn named the Maltese Terrier Maff, which was short for Mafia. Oh gosh. And in 1999, 2 Polaroid photos of Maff and Marilyn sold for $220,000. That is so much money. Marilyn has a very distinct way of speaking. She's very airy. She talks like this. I don't think I could even do it. It's a little bit softer. She talks like that, kind of like Lana Del Rey. I feel like I speak far too fast. I need to be a little slower, right? I don't know. I'm so bad at that. She actually adopted this way of speaking to overcome a childhood stutter. Quote, my first time was at the orphanage, and then later in my teens, I stuttered. And then I was elected secretary of the minutes of the English class. Then I would say the minutes of the class meeting, I'll go, oh, it's terrible. A speech therapist recommended the breathy voice as a tactic. She says while filming Something's Got to Give, her final movie, the stutter returned. She was then fired from the film soon after.
I don't know how it happened. I just stuttered. Sometimes if I'm very nervous or excited or something, I stutter. In fact, one time they were doing I had a small part in the movie, and the assistant director came in and yelled at me. Oh, he talked awful. And and so I, when I got into the scene, instead of my lines, I woo, 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 and the director came up. He was furious. He says, "You don't stutter." I said, "That's what you think."
Now, we mentioned a little bit about the Kennedys, and I want to talk a little bit more about that. Marilyn certainly has a complicated history when it comes to the family and was rumored to have had affairs with President John F. Kennedy and his brother Bobby. James Spada, a Marilyn biographer, told People that it was pretty clear that Marilyn had sexual relations with both Bobby and Jack. I mean, if you're going to hook up with anyone, at least be the president. But now thinking about the president, oh God, like Donald Trump, like Joe Biden, Barack Obama was a handsome man, but presidency really, it takes it out of you. Rumors about Marilyn and the then president began to swirl after her birthday performance. The two met in 1954 and engaged in an affair at some point between then and 1962. People believe that John actually passed Marilyn off to his brother Bobby at some point in the spring of 1962. Actually, Bobby Kennedy could be heard yelling on tapes from the night of Marilyn's death in 1962. He was devastated. We don't actually know to the extent what her relationship with the Kennedys were. I mean, I think we have a pretty good idea, but actually Joe, her ex, was vocal about his belief, saying that he felt like the Kennedys were lady killers and they always got away with it. They'll be getting away with it for 100 years from now, saying that this is a theme and that Marilyn may be a victim.
After they both stayed the night at Bing Crosby's house, with many accounts saying that the pair were together for the whole evening. Biographer James Spader states that it was clear that Marilyn had sexual relationships with both Bobby and JFK. And according to a 2013 book by Christopher Anderson, Marilyn reportedly called Jackie Kennedy, telling her that she intended on accepting a proposal of marriage from the president. Jackie reportedly responded, stating, "That's great, Marilyn. You move into the White House and take up the responsibilities of First Lady. I'll move out and you'll have all the problems." This is the only picture of them together. And after 60 years, there is still no evidence to confirm that the pair did engage in an affair, with rumours always coming back to the iconic Happy Birthday performance that Marilyn performed for JFK.
Thank you for watching this clip from the Let's Get Into It podcast. To view the full episode, visit the link listed below.